So yeah, this was actually we did an event in Stockholm in December, and this was one of the things that we got as feedback, that we want more interaction with the audience. So that's why we thought about doing it right now. So I'll start off with some topics, and then we can take some questions and discuss them here. I think we have quite a lot of different backgrounds, so that's great. One thing that I'm curious about is the ICO part of it. Like, we're seeing ICOs popping up everywhere, and we're also seeing some big companies that are going into it, like Kodak, the photo company, and also like AngelList, sorry? Telegram also. So yeah, what do you think is the future of ICOs, and how will it look like? Will it still be like small tech companies doing them, or will we see more and more big companies doing them? We can start with Martin.
Yeah, I think since ICOs has been around for only a couple of years, in a significant scale, it's still a super immature ecosystem, and we are already seeing people that want to rebrand the ICO to call them ISOs or TAOs instead. All of this in order to sort of combat the immaturity, and 10% of the money invested in ICO so far has disappeared to frauds and scams and pure failure, and that's perhaps acceptable if you see the returns that investors are already on the inside have seen instead. You compare to peer-to-peer lending, where also you lose some money, you need to diversify. ICOs are an experiment. It's come pretty far at this point, but you need still to see it as an experiment.
Yeah, of course, right now we see the wild west, especially 2017. You saw the charts and a lot of scams and so on. But in my opinion, of course, it's the future of fundraising. Today, our financial system, we have digitalized a 150-year-old system. Everything is digitalized, but the stock exchange here in Sweden opens at 9 p.m. and closes at 5, and it closes on weekends and on red days. Why? But will we go to a system that's open 24/7, 365 days a year, and are more secure than everything we've ever seen? Yeah, I think so.
I mean, does this work? Maybe? I don't know. I'll take this one straight. Yeah, I think in some ways, I mean, it's nice thinking about and talking about democratizing investment, but at the same time, I strongly believe that, like, the regulations we have in our societies are there for a reason, that people like them. I personally do not like them. I think the American regulation, for example, about being a accredited investor is kind of strange. But at the same time, I mostly see ICOs right now as a way of circumventing like those regulations, rather than being a valid and nicer way to acquire funds. But as you said, it's still an experiment.
Yeah, you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. Did it work? Yeah. All right. Cool.
Today we have very clear regulations for utilities. We have play money. It's like Steam money or whatever. And then we have securities like stocks. Very clear regulations. But with tokens, you can program it. You can do whatever you want. So everything here in between. And the regulators have no clue what this is. So this is the state that we're in right now, and there's a lot of regulators working on this. In 2018, I think we will see a lot of change.
Interesting. And do we have any further questions on this topic here? Tony? Yep.
The typical ICO, what is the, as you said, what's the name?
Max? Yep.
Max?
Max.
Erik.
My name is Max.
Yeah.
Erik. Yeah.
As you said, the company doesn't have any legal obligations against the one buying the token. Where does that go in this? So what happens when Filip and
Yeah, and that is if it's not working. Yeah.
Yeah, so that question can be resolved, and there is work underway to resolve it by like inferring legal obligations, and you can create laws around it. But also, I think solutions can be found in the technology itself. Like if you build a token around a smart contract, you can write the obligations into the contract, and you can have mechanism like allowing the investors in the ICO to vote on whether the obligations have been fulfilled before any money is paid out to the team or to the company.
Yeah, and next thing I want to talk about is something that you, Filip, raised, and that was distributed databases. And yeah, you can maybe elaborate a little bit more about that question that you had.
Yeah, basically, like, if the cryptocurrency values hadn't been at the level that they are today, I don't imagine most of you had been here. And I see like blockchain and distributed ledger technology most like a really cool database technology. I'm a bit skeptical about the way it will change our society. I mostly see it as a database technology. And I think there's kind of a disconnect between the actual technology and what we are, how we are thinking about it, maybe.
Yeah,
And I would like to hear Robert's opinion here with a long technical background.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the difference between like the blockchain and the distributed databases, and when should you use what? And
First of all, I would like to say that I've seen a lot of new technologies come and go. One time, smart cards was a hot technology. Now it's mainstay. And you have to find its niche to start with, because first of all, blockchain is a very difficult technology to implement, because you can't just put it in. In comparison, PKI is a simple technology. So you need to have its environment where it really works, and where you can have the good use, the benefits, really, because most of it here we're talking about visions. That's why I think it's very interesting for this healthcare project, because here we have a project that actually doing it this year if it don't get blocked. So we have already programs working on this area for cooperation for it. The only need is to get the go for the law departments on authorities that says we can use the blockchains. Else, well, it will be a fine report, basically, and tell the politicians that, well, you have some problems. So go back to blockchain as a technology. Yeah, it's an interesting technology, but it took me a long time to understand it and where you can put it to good use.
further question for that is then, have you looked into any of the uses that people try to do now, and what is your thought about that?
The first way we looked at is personal information and public storage, because in Europe we have a very strong laws, regulations on you can't store personal information in public, period. Nobody can, except the citizen can do it themselves, but nobody else, organizations are not allowed. So this is why you have this identification phase to add to the blockchain. So you need these spin-offs and added value things to the blockchain to find its environment.
Yeah, and back to you. The blockchain is just a database. But it's an immutable and a decentralized database. And you can do a lot with that. We see Bitcoin. I just went in on Google Trends and did you search buy Bitcoin or Bitcoin on Google Trends, and where in the world people search on Bitcoin relative to population. On top, Ghana, not Sweden, not the US, or not Switzerland, or whatever. So we see real use, but of course the price, it's crazy. So.
And talking about the, not that type of price, but the price that we're seeing that the actual environment are paying right now for the proof of work. And for you who doesn't know what proof of work is the underlying algorithm that makes the blockchain, some blockchains like Bitcoin, work. And right now, I don't know the exact numbers, but a couple of months ago, it was taking up as much energy as approximately as Denmark. So, is this a price we have to pay for have it decentralized, or how do you think it will play out with the algorithms, the consensus algorithms, to make this work?
All right, I can start. I think that this is nothing new. That in order to, for example, mine gold, there's a lot of environmental impact on that. You would hope that digital technology would get around that at some point, but maybe it's offset by the advances in solar technology and renewables. But I think there is a place for. And I'm happy that there's competing technologies like the IOTAs and array blocks that come up with similar use cases without the proof of work.
Yeah, and as you said, you went in on it. When it comes to new technology in the 21st century, of course it should not be an energy thief. It should not. We don't need more of that. But I think we'll see now with IOTA and this direct acyclic graph and EOS and other proof of stake or delegated proof of stake. I like the answer. This is a problem now, not tomorrow.
Delegated proof of stake and proof of stake is two other consensus algorithm that makes the cryptocurrency work as intended, decentralized.
But they don't have this. They don't have proof of concept completely yet, but kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, I think right now I haven't seen any other working implementation that is as safe as Bitcoin, and I think like in the long term we probably need another working implementation, and if we don't manage to get another working algorithm, that's a big issue. But as you said, and as previous speaker has said, the Bitcoin network provides tremendous value. So I think right now it's a cost we have to afford.
Yeah.
And I can add the thing, depending on what value you protect, the amount of work can reduce it drastically. Because, for example, in this healthcare application, what's the value you can gain by breaking the blockchain? Basically nothing. So to make it safe, you need a lot less work.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's reassuring that you need half of Denmark in order to attack the Bitcoin blockchain.
That's another perspective of it, yeah. I know there's some, yeah.
Do you think that the big players or the big institutions need to embrace this blockchain technology for it to have this wide spread, or do you think it's more of a disruptive force and that new players will arrive with blockchain technology?
That's a problem in this space right now, because the background of this space is like anarchist, very techie people and drugs and everything, and then we have the big banks. So now it's we're like pushing against the banks, and then the banks are pushing against us. What we need here is we see very small banks now contributing services for this, and they're growing very, very fast. The first bank that starts to give services or help their customers with different services, maybe wallets and so on. We don't want to be our own banks. I don't trust myself with all the money. I want some big trusted party, but I think we'll see the big banks start providing services, because it's a much better system. So we will see. I think.
I can give another, because I'm part of the group that is the traditionalists, because I'm working with the banks and so on, so I know them very well. The problem here, you have to separate bitcoins from blockchains. You know, in the mix, blockchains has its uses. But you need the good examples, and the good examples is very few at the moment. And when you have a couple of good examples, more traditional people like myself is going to start using them. So, but because of Bitcoins and this dark side of it, it has actually created a blocking factor.
So don't you think there's a risk that when the good examples appear, that as a traditionalist you will not recognize them as good examples?
It depends on, I mean, we can take this trust, for example. Trust is a very tricky big things to start with. Take, for example, bank ID. There is no specifications whatsoever ever published. But why do we trust bank ID? Because
The name is
the banks is behind it, and we trust the banks. Ergo, we need to trust bank ID. But there's nothing in the rules. Keyword, for example, I read exactly everything that I've written about on the website from the beginning, and there was nothing about trust. So I wondered why 1.4 million people was using it. That's a very good question, actually. So as a security expert, I will never say it is good to use it. And very lately now, they said who owns it. From the beginning, they didn't have an owner on it.
But then again, we're talking about Sweden as a country with with a very, very safe or like trusted bank system, and then we have a lot of countries, probably most of the countries in the world that people don't trust.
2 to 3 billion people in the world that does not have access to traditional financial services, like a credit card or like a bank account.
Yeah.
Then you're talking about a totally different implementation style.
Yeah. But I think here in Sweden as well, we've seen Vägverket, I think it was, we've seen Fastighetsverket. There are a lot of corruption here in Sweden as well. And blockchain is perfect for that. Of course, we should have an immutable ledger where what's happening to the money in our big governmental institutions, of course.
To be a contrarian again, I mean, if you read about Riksbankens initiative, e-kronan, right now, for example, they are talking mostly about like a blockchain that will not be a blockchain like the Bitcoin blockchain or the Ethereum blockchain, but rather like a closed blockchain, which will be used for like our currency right now, that's controlled by the central bank. And how do you feel about like the using blockchain technology to enforce the status quo rather than disrupting it with new distributed technology?
It's contradictory, actually. It's complete opposite to our decentralized networks that are private and everything, like Bitcoin. This is the complete opposite. They have an immutable ledger of every transaction that you do. I trust Sweden in the sense that they will do it, and I think this is good for Sweden, because I think that people should not launder money, they should not buy huge amounts of drugs or whatever. And there are other benefits with it, so theoretically it will be a cryptocurrency. And with cryptocurrency, we have a technology now coming to Bitcoin called Lightning Network, and with that we can do atomic swaps, so we can switch between different cryptocurrencies without any cost. And Singapore are working with this as well, and China is working with this, and I think Switzerland as well are working on it to create to their national currency, to a cryptocurrency. Then we can start streaming money between each other. We will be able to stream value at the same as we stream like Netflix or Spotify, as we stream information today. We'll be able to stream money between countries. And I think that's good.
I know there's a lot. Question.
I didn't understand the question. I mean, the blockchain is just one technology. You have to look at it from a bigger perspective. It's an arms race. and technologies come and go, algorithms come and go. So in 25 years, all the algorithms today, they will be obsolete to start with. I mean, all the algorithms which I was working in 1989, they are obsolete. So you have to look at that perspective.
And I think we have to,
Things will change in itself.
I think the short answer is no.
and I think we also have to mention that blockchain is a very bad technology for hiding information. It's a transparent system. That's the thing. So if you have a lot of nodes with, for example, personal information, and it's very secure with everyone. But if you hack one node, you have the complete database. So then you have to have only some kind of cryptographic proof, and then you need some other. But then, okay, why don't only use one database with that proof? So to hide information is not perfect, but for to have a transparent system that is immutable, great.
Yeah, the next thing I want to bring up is if you're, as a company, you want to evaluate if blockchain is the way to go, if you can adopt blockchain in your company in any way. How are you as a company evaluating that question?
Well, I think to start with, you should not pay your consultants so much that they will invent ways to use blockchain even though there's no need.
The most serious consulting company out there, called Consensus, they say no to 99% of their requests. And I think everyone should learn about it and know what is happening, because it will change every industry. But there are only a few that actually need to implement it, in my opinion.
Any skeptical over there?
It depends on application, actually. You must look at the core values of the application. What's the business value? What you're trying to achieve. You look at more from a philosophy aspect. Because, take for example, I've been working as a security consultant for 30 years. There's one rule that always applies. Protected value, attack value, and how much you can gain. This will always apply. And the same with when you're talking about blockchains. I mean, there's a right and wrong way to do it, but you must find the right situation how you use it. It has inherent weaknesses and strengths, and you must use them. So there's not one solution for everything, because humanity has showed that there's never one, there's always several.
And if you start with the problem, that's a good starting point. Blockchain is a solution. It creates problems, so that can be, if you make that circular, maybe it will solve its own problems, but there needs to be a fundamental business problem to solve before you start thinking about using blockchain. Start with the problem, and as soon as you hear someone talking about blockchain as a solution, and they want to use it as a solution, then ask them what is the problem. And if they can't answer, then it's probably not needed.
That's actually a little bit how I feel when you look at the coin market cap right now, and you look at all these coins, and you start to look into them, and at least I'm questioning, like, a lot of them, like, why are you even using the technology? And then you can discuss the price above that when people are like buying it at a price and they're not intended to use it.
Banana coin,
for example. Yeah.
It was an ICO that a few months ago or something, they went out and said, we're doing something, putting bananas on the blockchain or something. And then he did an ICO and got millions of dollars, and then he just wrote on his site, penis, and then it took all the money. And I think that is important to happen in this space, so people start questioning the projects that are being out there and the value of these projects, like Dogecoin. They're publicly, the founder of Dogecoin are publicly out there saying this is a joke, and it's valued to $2 billion. It's crazy. So it's a very immature market and very fun as well. if you know what you're doing. Just look at what's happening.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Like this ridiculous value of these coins, do you think that this somehow reflects that we actually have some kind of inflation in the real fiat currencies that's not shown in the rest of the economy? That we have too much money.
It's a very, very, very interesting actually to where all the money coming from. 2017, in the beginning of the year, the crypto markets was $17 billion. In the end of the year, it was $600 billion. And S&P 500 was up 19.7%, and some global index was up like 10 or 20%. And these markets are completely separated. And there's a lot of money coming now and printing a lot of money. And there's a lot of talk about the everything bubble. Yeah, you see my point? Yeah, like you have to think here what will happen to the economy. And I'm a bit skeptical towards the traditional financial system right now because the amount we're printing a lot of money, the market is going up. Yeah.
So yeah, the current economic system that we have in society has inflation built in, and it's kept up around 2% by design because that's how you get consumer to spend. And with a deflationary system like most cryptocurrencies, people want to hold on to their currencies so hard that there's been a term invented for holding on to them, and you actually think about, like, if you buy a computer for $1,000 today, if I hold on to that money for a year, maybe that would be $10,000. Do I really want to spend that $10,000 on a computer today? Do I really need it? And it creates a different set of values for purchase decisions and consumption. And I think hopefully can have a huge impact on how society works. That as Kalle said in the Mac before, that we spend less money on crap and only on the things that are valuable.
Do you think that could have a negative impact on technology development and so on?
Of course, as an entrepreneur, I want people to spend money on the things I create, but I'm forced to provide even more value. Like in an inflationary system, you want to buy stuff because otherwise your money will lose value, while something you buy might be useful along the way and retain value. And that's sort of a twisted reality that we live in that way.
In my opinion here, I'm not studied that much economy, but I think that Bitcoin will never be the currency. I see it as only store value. With a fixed cap, you will always have a lot of trading volume. Let's imagine that the gold, the market cap of gold right now is around $4 trillion. You wouldn't want to have a certificate or an ETN of gold as a currency because it's too volatile. So I think that Bitcoin, put your money there as a store value or as digital gold, but I think it will never be the currency. I think we will see other types of currencies with some it will be decentralized, but with some kind of inflation or deflation, depending on what people want. And you can discuss a lot about that.
I want to finish on this guy's question here. Where does the money come from into this new economy? I'd say it's people like me and everybody else who all of a sudden have a new way of...
Can you, a round of applause for Filip Nilsson. He has to go, so...
were the first ones, but right now, in the end of 2017, we've seen a lot of big money coming in, a lot of big trading firms, and I see that is one reason we've seen the huge volatility, a lot of pump and dumps. If you have a few $1 billion, which a lot of big trading firms and rich people have, it's very easy to manipulate the market right now. So, yeah, I think we see both right now, but from the beginning, I think this kind of fun thing about this, the ones that have profited the most from this isn't high finance. It's tech geek anarchists in their cellar and drug users that bought on different kind of decentralized exchanges in 2011 or something and forgot to exchange a few bitcoins or so in their wallet, which is kind of fun.
An interesting thing that is dangerous that there are such inequalities in Bitcoin. What I mean is that, for example, Satoshi Nakamoto is estimated to have like $4 billion in Bitcoin or something like that, or 40% of the market. I don't remember the exact number, but it was pretty impressive. And there were like pretty big differences between people. Don't you think that could be something that liquidity is?
I think there's a risk that professional traders and big institutions with a lot of money can manipulate the market to the extent that they siphon money out of like the little man, so to speak, into and suck it out into really big institutions, so that we end up with a situation where all the rich get richer again.
I can tell you, in my youth, I worked for Stockholm Option Exchange, and I got a lesson learned by one of the market makers. You have to remember that the Bitcoin market is so tiny if compared to normal currencies. I mean, you're talking about 1,000 parts effectively in transactions. Because of this, it's always easy to manipulate it. Because one person, like Soros, for example, he doesn't need to spend very much money to manipulate the value.
I think it's also when I work in this space, it's everything I do, and I think this is the whole world and so on. But when you start thinking about it, the market right now, the market cap, I think it's around 500 billion or something. At the peak of the dot-com bubble, I think only internet stocks were valued around $7 trillion. And then we have gold is around $4 trillion. And then we have stocks, I have no clue. But here we have internet of value, as you can call it. Are we in the beginning? And we speak about the flaws of this technology, and so of course we are very, very early. And we speak about the high prices of these, but this is a new economy. Yeah, and now in the beginning we will see these pump and dumps and so on, but arbitrages never exist for that long amount of time because now more money is flowing in. So it's exciting times, but also different.
I think there actually was a study done, I think it was in 2013, when we had a big crash in the Bitcoin market. And they did a study on it and found out, if I don't remember it wrong, that it was, they think it was like one or a couple of persons that did that crash by themselves. So yeah, it sure could be a big problem.
Because the person who were mining Bitcoins in the early days
I think it's like 25 people owns almost half of the Bitcoins or something. But one fun thing there is that it could also be a Christopher story. They maybe bought for a few $100, 2009, 1,000 Bitcoin or something, and then they lost their wallet. It could be that, but we don't know.
So, do we have any more questions? Otherwise, I think we're gonna, round this evening up. A big thank, one last question.
What's your opinion on this public Bitcoin, among others, is a public ledger? I wonder what's your opinion on using peer-to-peer? You touched on that. You thought that would never happen. It's like store of value. But I wonder, why would you ever want to accept Bitcoin like an average? Because they could track you. They could see, wow, he has 300 Bitcoins. Like, why would you ever use a system that has that unless you're like the state or something, which you wanna audit. But if I send Bitcoin to him, I can see how much he has in his address.
If you know his address.
Yeah, but if I send him Bitcoin, I will know.
Yeah. And then we have solutions like Monero. We have different kind of privacy coins. And they use, for example, ring signatures, they call it. And that when you receive a transaction, you can see like 10 different addresses that it came from. You have no clue which one. And then we have something called stealth addresses. We don't know which address that received it, but the right one got it, which is kind of weird. But these type of technologies will be used in a lot of blockchains when privacy is important. And in the beginning, when maybe how many of you have heard of Silk Road? The drug is here. No, just kidding. It was a decentralized marketplace in around 2012 or 2011, I think it started, for buying everything, like drugs, like weapons, like everything. They used Bitcoin as a currency, and right now, because it's an immutable ledger, you can go back to this base because complete Bitcoin's network was only primarily used for Silk Road, and you can, because you have to be very technical to understand how to be anonymous, to create new addresses every time you do a transaction and so on, to be anonymous. And if you're a druggie, you just want to get drugs, you don't think about that. So you can go back now, kind of easy to, and then if you don't have to be that technical to use the IP address, and then you know. So you can still be anonymous with Bitcoin, but if you use a traditional exchange like Coinbase, and then you send it, then you think you want to be anonymous and send it to one address, and then you send it to 20 other addresses. You just go back, and then you see, oh, here, Erik bought this, and then he buys drugs 20 addresses later. So it's both not private at all, but you could still be private.
Yeah, would you use Bitcoin?
If you want to be fully private, you can use it, but then you need to think about how you're using it. If you have intentions of being fully anonymous, but then most of us probably don't have intentions to be fully anonymous. If you don't want to like hide from the taxes and stuff like that, of course. But yeah, it is possible. But then again, yeah, you probably need to buy them anonymously and send them to other addresses that you haven't connected to anything. But then again, why don't you just use another currency that is meant to be fully anonymous?
And I think the anonymous part isn't the interesting part. I'm a millennial. I don't care. I give all my information to Facebook. I give all my information to Google. They know everything about me, which I kind of, when you start questioning it, it's kind of fucked up. But still, it's the decentralized aspect of it. I have, what the banks did in 2008. That is kind of fucked up with a transparent, more decentralized system. They couldn't have done that because people would be looking at what are they doing. So I think the decentralized and transparent aspect. And I think it's a lot of very naive people that think that we will have like an anarchist utopia with this technology, and then we have a totally centralized system today. I think we will around here in the future.
It's definitely a use for, if you remove the Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is just problematic, but if you look at the blockchains, you want public ledgers to see if, for example, we can take who owns what land, for example, in Sweden. You can monitor your own, the blockchains to see if your land is changing owner. Because the authority has trouble telling you that somebody changed ownership on your land. So that's a good use. And you don't need to have your name on it. You can have a number which you need to go to the authority to ask, who is this really? But publish this number, you can see the number change, then you know somebody bought it.
And the company Chromaway that works with the land registry here in Sweden, I know the guys personally, and it's very cool that they do it here in Sweden. It's cool and innovative and so on. but still we don't actually need it. We trust the land registry. I don't think that they will remove. Erik doesn't live here anymore. No, I live there. But now they have a new customer, which is a state in India, with 50 million. The population is 50 million in that state. That's cooler. But when they get to countries like Venezuela or Uganda, to have an immutable ledger of who owns what, then it gets cool. So I think it's a guy called Andreas Antonopoulos. Maybe some guys of you have heard about it. A huge name in this space. He told that when he got here to Sweden, he told us about when you start working in this space, it's not that you want to make your country better. You want to give this to the rest of the world, because Sweden is a very well-functioning society.
It's worth mentioning, I think, that Kalle in the back there in the hoodie, he's the guy that pretty much coded ChromeAway's private blockchain in a box from scratch.
Cool.
Yeah.
So,
Jürgen and Henrik.
yeah, with that being said, I think we're going to round up this event, and yeah, there's a couple of beers left back there if you want to continue the discussions. But
come and speak to us.
yeah, we'll be here. Oh, sorry, long day. I'm very sorry. Let's bring up first. Martin's gonna talk about Stream.
Just very briefly mentioning that I'm running a company called Stream, where in this context I can call us the blockchain studio of Linköping. So if any of you want to work in blockchain projects, we have a couple of them up and running now, looking for team members, and that could be as consultants or employees or founders if you want.
And then we have Lead, who also can give her the mic maybe, or if she has it. Yeah.
I shouldn't. Just realizing I'm the first female on scene tonight.
If you're a female, start working in this space, because it's cool, and I don't like this. We host a lot of events, and it's very hard to find female speakers.
It is, and actually we talked about this.
Yeah.
When I was the one putting this presentation together, and it was the first thing I saw. I was like, I was even thinking about putting all the panel people on the presentation, but like I can't do that because there's only men here, and yeah, you see the men. As Erik said, it's not that we don't want it. We don't know anyone. So if you're good in the crypto scene, please, yeah.
And then we have a few friends that are now starting Blockchain Women, and there are 2 girls that I know back in Stockholm. So if you're a girl here, come up and I will connect you with that.
Great.
Now, Lead.
Yes. So I'm actually disappointed to say I'm not an expert within blockchain, but I do believe I represent something that is an important and good complement to that knowledge. How many of you are familiar with Lead Business Incubator? Not too bad, because Lead is actually a top business incubator in Sweden, and happens to be in Linköping and Norrköping, and more precise, in this house. And we are a team of business coaches working with supporting and guiding people with bright ideas to help them to start to make a successful startup and in the future a great company. We would like to see more companies within the blockchain technology. Not the technology itself, as you say so many times today, but the business side of it. How can this be implemented in the industry and things like that? So we would like to gather people with its interest, having an idea, or maybe being an entrepreneur that would like to be within this field, to have an idea workshop. I think since a lot of people have already left, I think I will add information to the Facebook page, if that's okay. And we will gather people and set a date within a near future. So I hope to see you there. And if you have any questions, we will be here for a while. It's me and Gunilla in the back and Anders. If you have any questions, just take someone else and ask us. Thanks.
And yeah, I'm really sorry that the time flew by and we were a little bit optimistic about the time schedule. So we will definitely put up a link to that on the Facebook page if you're interested in that. So yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for coming here to this event. Stay in touch.